Well, hello everyone, and welcome back to costumeco. I am delighted today to be here with Sarah Evelyn. She is the costume designer of The Fall Guy. She's also actually, Sarah, you've got a great body of work besides this
Oh,
movie.
thank
So,
you.
but today we're here to talk about this movie. As
Mhm.
well, before we go on, I just want to congratulate you on being nominated for a Costume Designer Guild Award for this
Thank you.
movie. It's
I'm so
for
excited.
yeah, excellence in contemporary film. So,
Yeah.
question: have you ever been nominated for this award before?
I had not excellence in contemporary film. I was nominated for a CDGA for American Horror Story Cult, and I think also for Hollywood, but never for film, always for TV. So that's really exciting.
Yes, this is a wonderful milestone.
Yeah.
And so before we get into the show, actually, because I always have this question from people, what is the difference between contemporary and like other genres? Would you mind just quickly explaining that?
I mean, contemporary, like I feel like I essentially feel like there are sort of three genres in filmmaking in terms of costumes. And then the one genre can get broken out, but like there's period, right? So really anything up to at this point, probably like 2015 would be period. And then that breaks out into 60s, 50s, 40s, 30s. Then there's sci-fi and futuristic, and then there's contemporary. Um, yeah, and I actually think contemporary might be the hardest.
I've actually heard that quite a lot. And for people who are watching my channel, they know that mostly I do, fantasy or science
Mhm,
fiction. But I've
mhm.
really come to love contemporary and appreciate it because I do. It's sort of like comedy. Comedy is very difficult. People think it's easy, but it's actually not. And I think it's probably the same for contemporary. People think, oh, it's easy. You just go shop some clothes. But we
Definitely.
can get more into that.
Yeah.
And but anyway, so here to talk about the Fall Guy. But before we do, I just want to learn a little bit about you. Would you mind telling me a bit about your background, like how you got into costume design?
I'd be happy to. Actually, it was a very, very, very windy path. I think that like I always wanted to do something that was fashion. I might have always wanted to do something that was costume design. Like when I was really little, like when I was 4, I would wake up really early and like make all my different outfits for nursery school. And like I was very into bonnets. I mean, I was very, very into period clothing. But I think that I grew up in a really academic family, and there's a lot of really dumb, like kind of like stereotypes about fashion and working in fashion and working with clothing. So I think I sort of felt like, oh, I really love this, but that's not something that I can do. And I ended up going to college, and after college actually going to get a master's in art conservation, because I was like, well, that's working with textiles, that's working with objects, that's working with art, which ultimately in some ways storytelling. um and I did that for a little while, but ultimately I think I got a little disenfranchised by the idea that I was going to need to go to Idaho and work like in a museum for no money with these precious materials. And I was sort of like, this isn't my world. It's so like hoity toity and removed. And like, why am I going to dedicate my life to this? This like doesn't really matter. It does matter, but it doesn't matter in that context. Like, oh, I'm just going to be in some little tower conserving these like old works of art. I mean, that's the truth is that's what I thought when I was in my 20s. Might not be what I think now, but that was sort of what I thought. So I ended up leaving that and sort of actually doing all sorts of other stuff, including radio sales and working like in broadband before everyone really had high speed
Wow.
internet. I know I did a lot of things, and actually had a bit and worked in PR and worked in product placement. I and actually had a bit of a life crisis and ended up sitting down with a mentor of mine because I felt like I needed to figure out what my career was going to be. I was having a baby, like how was I going to make money? And we decided we were going to talk about my career, and she was sort of like, write down all the different things that you'd like to do and kind of write down what you think your skill set is. And I went to sit down with her, not thinking costume design at all, but I started it being like, well, I've always wanted to be a costume designer, but, and was going to launch into all the other things that I felt like I could do. And she was like, but what? And I was like, but like, I never could. And she was like, why? And I think I was kind of like, yeah, like why? And actually, I was like 37 at that point, having a baby. I mean, I thank God for my specific path that I was not in costume design in my 20s, because I think I would have been so overstimulated by like set life and cute boys and drinks after work. Like, I don't know what would have happened to me. I was not ready for that in my 20s. So I definitely think this was my path. But yeah, like I started this industry at 37. And I think that all the other things I had done, including material science and art conservation and sales, like really sales, like prepared me for, kind of like my career now.
Yeah, this is the most unusual background I've heard.
I
Now,
know.
the conservation thing, not so much, because obviously you have an appreciation for historical artifacts and things like that, I'm sure. And you probably did a lot of art history or, like,
Yeah.
was it textiles or like,
Well, I
I have
mean,
a
you have
friend
to
who's
do
actually
to get
material.
into
Mhm.
art conservation school. There is really a lot of prerequisites. So like I did a lot of history, a lot of art histories of all kinds. Like you really need the general background. And then yes, you get into art conservation school and then you start to specialize.
That's incredible. Well, I love hearing your story. Others I have spoken to, come a lot from architecture. I always found that
Mm,
really
yes,
fascinating. I always
yes.
think of it
And I can see
sort of
that.
similar. But
Yeah.
then the sales thing. So, what, how do you use sales? I'm very curious about that.
Well, and I think this is like our modern world as well. But the truth is, like, getting any job is sales. Like, convincing anyone to do what you want them to is sales in some ways. Like, convincing like an actor of your idea is sales. Like, I just think that, like, learning to talk to and also being ready to give up on your idea actually is sales, like pivoting in a lot of ways. I just think it's learning to figure out how to communicate in a way that you can get across your idea. And then when you're not getting across your idea, figuring out how to pivot so that you can sort of like get to your goal. So whether
Yeah.
that's like, I want to sell you a radio ad, or that's like, I want to convince you of my idea, it's not that different, you know?
Yeah, and obviously, like when you're doing things like mood boards and visuals, like you're showing that to the
Yeah.
director and sort of saying this, these, or maybe you're doing thumbnail sketches or things like that, that you're saying this is my idea, and then they might push back a bit, or maybe not. Maybe they're like, I
Yeah.
love it,
Usually
but
I
then
feel like I mean,
yeah,
it's
you
a conversation,
it's a conversation,
Yeah.
yeah, and then you can come back again and be like, have you ever had a situation, and I'm sure you have,
Mhm.
where you've been pushed back and then you've gone away and thought about it and you're like, you know what, this actually ends up being a better idea in the end.
All the time.
Yeah.
I think I am I am of the I find that being a creative, well, I've never been a creative anywhere else, but being a creative it's a heartbreak. It's like a constant heartbreak, and you're constantly like giving birth and then having to like let go of these children of yours. Like you love your ideas when you think about it, but also filmmaking is collaborative. And I think all the greatest filmmakers, directors included, are find collaboration with their team. That collaboration can look like all sorts of things. I mean,
Mhm.
collaboration can look like, I know that when X person tells me they want this, it is that. That's a collaboration too. I am collaborating with the way that you are working. But I do think I really believe that it is my job to be of service to the project, and that I am there to enact the director's vision, but care for it. Like I'm an editor. So like care for it in the way that all the time someone tells me an idea and I'm like, oh, I hate that idea. Yes, sometimes I'm actually like at the end, I'm like, that was brilliant. Sometimes I'm like, okay, how do I make this bad idea good? But all of it creates the stuff that like the creative diamonds are made of, I think. I mean, I'm very much like, I need to be of service to the film, which is being of service to the process, which usually I'm not controlling. Like sometimes that process has to do with budget and not a very good one. Sometimes that process has to do with all your last minute casting. Sometimes that process has to do with the way your director works, your producer works, your, like, or when you go to a foreign location, it can be the way a new crew works. So, yes, I think bottom line, like all the time I'm having to revise, pivot, let go of ideas, take on new ideas, figure out what I can do with the new ideas.
Yeah, that's the one thing I've heard from many designers is just this, you have to bend. You're like a willow. You have to be like willing to
You
bend with the
must.
wind. And then hopefully at the end, everyone comes out with a finished product that, you're all happy with.
Yeah.
I know there's been some designers I've spoken to. They're like, oh yeah, I really fought for this one. I'm so happy I did. It ended up on the poster or something like that. So
Mhm.
those must be very rewarding
Yes.
situations.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, for sure.
So now let's get into the Fall Guy. I don't know how you came upon this, of course, as a young person. I was aware of the show. I don't think I watched it. I knew Lee Majors, like I was,
Yeah,
loved the
yeah.
$6 Million Man, loved science fiction as a kid.
Amen. Totally. Same.
So how did you find out about this project? How did you get into the project?
Well, this was my third project working with the director and producer, David Leitch and Kelly McCormick. So I had a relationship with them, and I think we have like a really good working relationship. So early on, they had told me that Fall Guy was happening, and I was so excited. For a couple of reasons. One, I am familiar with the Fall Guy and Lee Majors, and like I did watch the Fall Guy. Two, I think stuntmen are like the coolest things ever and just like the unsung heroes. And I have a lot of respect for that craft. And in some ways, I think being a stuntman is the best metaphor for being on a film crew. Like even though I'm not putting my life in danger, I do feel like my life is like, I feel like it's that important. I feel like my costumes are that important. I feel like it's that important not to hold up camera. Like it's very, very high stakes. So, and I loved the premise of, I mean, I just loved the premise of who the Fall Guy was in this movie. Just kind of like a regular old guy doing his best to make the best decisions. And I loved that it was also like an action movie with a love story, and also that they wanted to do so many practical stunts. I thought was so cool. So it was just super ideal.
Yeah, I wanted to say my husband and I were talking about this, the fact that stuntmen and women are not, they don't have a category, for instance, at the Academy Awards, or I don't know about
Yeah,
BAFTA, but they don't,
no, they don't.
their job is so important and yet they're not acknowledged. And it's sort of very strange. So
Um,
this movie is a bit of a love letter, I think, to stunts.
yeah. And I think all of filmmaking. I mean, I think it was a love letter to all crews, really. Yeah.
So we were talking about the Fall Guy, the original from the 80s. Did you go back and watch any of those episodes?
Definitely. I'm really, really, really big on research. I just feel like that is the place to dig in. That's the place to start. I mean, I think I watched the whole Fall Guy, which was not that easy to watch.
Oh, really?
But I did. You have to like, I felt like I was like digging it up on YouTube. Mhm.
I was going to say, because it's some of those older shows, it is hard to find them on DVD or whatever
Yeah.
nowadays, unless they've
Yeah.
done a new release or something. Maybe
Yeah.
they'll do a new release after this.
I know. Be awesome.
So to start off with the Fall Guy, so it's set in a contemporary world. We were talking about contemporary, but then of course you have a movie which is
Mhm.
like a science fiction.
Yeah.
I was almost like steampunk. It's sort of I think they call it space age western.
Yes.
That's within the movie.
Yeah.
So do you want to tell us
Yeah.
a little bit about this? Because just doing a little bit of research, I read that there was actually a Metal Storm
Yes.
movie that
There
this is
was a Metal Storm,
okay.
which I actually watched as well, which
Okay,
also
how was
I
it?
had to get my hands on. It was amazing, only in the way an early 80s sci-fi movie could be. Low budget sci-fi movie could be. I mean, it was like it's so
Yeah.
epically campy and awesome. And so we weren't necessarily like the name Metal Storm, they needed to name their movie, and the name Metal Storm was something that they could access because of the Universal catalog, because it's part of the Universal catalog. So, but it wasn't necessarily about being inspired by the original Metal Storm. Although I did find the original Metal Storm inspiring in that it was like an important part of the sci-fi lexicon at the time, in that um, in like late 70s, early 80s, there was Star Wars, which was hugely influential on filmmaking. And so this movie was kind of like a low budget, other take on, can we do a Star Wars kind of a thing. But more than, so that's sort of how Metal Storm like fit in for me. Really, where I started creating that world was just looking at the lexicon of sci-fi, which was so cool. Like, I think I watched every sci-fi movie, definitely every influential sci-fi movie. But actually, I watched the documentary about Jodorowsky's Dune.
Oh, I
which
love
is
that.
such an epic documentary. And I just love the idea that this movie was the most influential movie that was never made. And like, if you watch the movie, you learn that he was bringing together a lot of the illustrators and a lot of the VFX people that weren't even really doing this kind of VFX for the movies. And those people then moved on and did Star Wars, right? And then they moved on and worked with like James Cameron for that, it's not Alien. What's that, for the underwater movie that he did that I was so obsessed with? I cannot remember.
The Abyss? Oh, I don't even know. Oh, it is The Abyss.
For The Abyss.
Yeah.
Yes, I was so into that movie. But like, things for people who were working on The Abyss had originally worked on Jodorowsky's Dune. So like, I sort of started there really, really looking at what was the language of sci-fi and how did we want to bring that into our movie. And a lot of it kind of turned into, like, I really started looking at quilting, which you see in Star Wars, but also you saw a lot of quilting in the 80s, like Larry Legaspi, who then has really influenced Rick Owens, who does a lot of like sci-fi related fashion. Anyways, I digress. But I
want to hear about that. I want to hear about that.
Okay. So Metal Storm, at bottom line, and then I'll say more. Metal Storm wasn't so much influenced by the original Metal Storm as it was like informed by like early influential sci-fi. And in some ways, every sci-fi is a Western. Like Star Wars was a Western in some ways. I don't know. Can we say every movie is a Western? That's like a whole nother situation though. And that's a whole nother story or a whole nother conversation. So let me see. So I got to these, like all of these mental places with Metal Storm and pitched my ideas to David and Kelly, and they are amazingly collaborative. Like, I really love my collaboration with them. So I actually started out, because I was on the movie really early when we were still figuring out, and that's also another thing that's amazing about having a relationship. You get on the movie early, and we were still figuring out what Metal Storm was going to look like and who the Metal Storm characters were going to be. And they were still figuring out the Metal Storm like production design. So my first meeting with them, actually, I kind of made this deck, which was images of all the most influential sci-fi movies, like in the history of cinema. And that was, and sort of pitched to them my Jodorowsky's Dune and kind of what I thought about the quilting. And we started being like, okay, we like these images. These feel right. And then from those images, I did more expanded mood boards, which, then it was like narrowing down, okay, that feels better. But we still really hadn't gotten to the cowboy or the gold and silver of it all. I felt like we were excited about our ideas, but I hadn't yet gotten the like, you can get David really excited about something. And I hadn't yet gotten the like he will give you the holy shit, that's it.
Mm-hmm.
He will go there. And I hadn't yet gotten that. So
you hadn't had that nailed it.
Yeah. So they were already in Australia where we filmed the movie doing prep, and I kind of just like went back in one more time, and I took two of the ideas that they had felt was the strongest, and I happened upon like a space cowboy idea. And there was just something about the space cowboy that was like so cool. I'm not saying that it is the most unique idea. I'm not like, are there any unique ideas anymore? But it just kind of felt right, and pitched him the space cowboy, and I nailed it. So then we got to Australia, and in doing all the R&D, that was really where we got to the gold and silver. And that was really Kelly, like being in our fittings. That was it, like early fittings, doing R&D. And again, getting to do R&D is so huge. And it really was this moment that Kelly had where it was like, oh my God, the good guys are gold, the bad guys are silver. And that's like why it's called Metal Storm.
Oh, I love it.
It's not about heavy metal. It's about the color of the metal.
I love it. A battle of metals.
Yes, the battles of the metals.
So were you doing mock-ups and things like that? Like in the fittings?
Yes, we were mocking up and doing fittings and starting to work. Like we had this amazing workshop in Australia. The cutter fitters there are so incredible. The ager dyers there are so amazing. Our leather worker was like just bananas. I can't say enough. So we were really starting to make mock-ups. Like we were starting to put things together, because you really cannot figure it out until you are actually looking at it, on a person. And then even early on, before we camera tested, we did a Metal Storm camera test with the location and the costumes. And that was so informative as well.
Yeah, this is sort of brought to mind, like I'm thinking about like 3PO on Tatooine, like you got the metallic robot against that sort of sand dunes backdrop, because you're dealing with like a lot of rocks and things, right?
Yes, totally. Yeah.
So you have that sort of natural environment, and then you have this more supernatural, I guess.
Yeah.
By the way,
technological.
Yes. Which is what's sort of in Star Wars. I know they talked about Tatooine being like the natural world, and then the space station being the technological world. So, quick question though. Is it like a glazed leather? Like what is that fabrication that you use for those costumes?
I mean, there are a couple things like okay, so first of all, this is a testament to how good the cutter fitters are and how amazing the DP is, and what a vision like David Leitch had, and how hard it is to get fabric in Australia. So we did use gold leather, and leather is readily available in Australia. But oh my God, and how amazing our stunt team was too. We ended up making the gold cargo pants out of gold lame.
Oh.
And so the cutter fitters like flatlined the lame, which is huge. And, like part of me was dying when it was like we were getting the yes with the gold lame. I was like, oh my God, this is going to be the end of my career. Like Metal Storm is going to look like a prom, or like a wedding, and we camera tested, but also like I talked about that. Like I expressed that to like the DP, and I expressed that to David and Kelly, and they were like, let's go camera test. We think this is going to look good. And sometimes it is really important to get all of those people who have looked at film, seen things for real, and then seen them on film. Like it's so helpful to get all of that like empirical knowledge weighing in on these decisions, because also gold lame really, really helped us with budget, and we had to make like 100 million of these. Then of course we went to Chris O'Hara, the stunt coordinator, and we were like, so we think we're using gold lame for like the trench coat and the cargo pants. And like gold lame, there's this point where he has to get set on fire like 8 times. Like gold lame is not good for fire. In the US, usually your stunt people are like, you must use natural materials. And Chris was like, all right, we're going to make it work.
Isn't it just kind of like melt, or like kind of like, like it sort of turns into powder?
It just melts. No, it melts.
Oh, it melts. Okay.
Like, first of all, catches on fire right away. That's like one of the things. Like when these guys do these fire stunts, they wear these suits underneath, and they like ice down cold water suits. They put like stuff on the suits to keep them cold, because one thing you're really trying to do is to keep the body temperature of the stunt person down.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you think about like burns, it's like that's about heat, like so Gold Lame catches on fire right away and melts. So now you're talking about something hot melting to your suit underneath. Like it just really causes a lot more opportunity for it. It creates like higher risk essentially.
Whereas like leather or cotton or some
Doesn't
natural
catch on
fabric would,
fire as
yeah,
easily and is
yeah,
easier and doesn't melt. So it's not melting to something. You're not having
yeah.
like a hot substance melt down, and doesn't catch on fire as quickly.
Yeah, which is
So
why I guess also they use it for motorcycle armor, or
right.
well, if I think it slides, but maybe it's less likely to catch on fire.
Yes, true. More
Mhm.
protective. Also, like leather is really protective from like scratches and stuff. But the other thing I was going to say is actually when you're setting the scent guy on fire, you're not setting the garments on fire purposely. You're putting shit on the outside of the garment that is going to catch flame. So when you're using cotton, and like, I hope I'm not saying this wrong, and I hope some stunt person isn't like, you're so dumb, Sarah. Like you can write me if this isn't true. But and I'm not saying I'm representing 100%, but you're catching the substance on fire. So you want the garment to not catch on fire so easily, because then it's not getting down to the stunt person so quickly. And also you're having more opportunity for flame on camera.
Yeah, I'm learning so much, by the way. This is crazy.
Well,
I
hope
think
I'm
it's called
explaining it correctly.
accelerant. I think it's accelerant, right? The stuff that they pour
Yes.
on their
Yeah.
costumes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Some like gel
A
stuff.
gel. Oh, okay. And then we got to see that actually in the movie. So that was
Yeah.
pretty cool. And then
Yes,
so you're
yes,
explaining all this.
yes, yes. And by the way, I just want to say, if you are into stunts, they David and Kelly did a stunt documentary. You definitely get to see a lot of behind the scenes of the Fall Guy. It's an
Okay.
amazing documentary.
Okay. Well, what I'll do is I'll look it up.
Okay.
If I can get my pen to work, I can look at this on the replay.
Okay.
And then I'll add a link to it in the
Yes,
comments.
yes,
Yeah.
amazing.
Okay, and I'm gonna go watch it too, because I'm really
Yeah,
fascinated. I watched
yeah,
this movie with my husband, so it's like,
yeah.
yeah, we'll have to.
Awesome.
So all right, so here's my next question for you.
Yeah,
So it's sort of meta that this is a movie about a stuntman. I have to read it because it's sort of, I don't
it's
know,
okay.
to get
All
my
good.
thoughts out.
I get it.
This is a movie about a stuntman for a leading man, and then we read that Ryan Gosling has like 8 stunt doubles.
Yeah.
How did you manage the logistics of creating costumes for so many stunt doubles and principal actors? And what were the biggest challenges? Sorry, I had to read that because I couldn't.
No, all good, all good. This is where like a great ACD workroom and supervisor come in, and like made to order person. I mean, your first thing that you're doing is when you're doing the R&D, you're really considering fabric that you can get yards and yards and yards and yards and endless supply of. So like that was why gold lame also worked, because there's endless supply of gold lame in the world. And by the way, I didn't even mention that the bad guys' costumes were made out of bridal satin, which also I kind of wanted to dye,
Wow.
but was assured that it was going to like look good on film, especially after the ager dyers got to it.
Yeah. Was it synthetic though, or was it a silk?
It was synthetic.
Oh,
It was
wow. Oh,
poly.
wow.
Yeah.
And you can dye that? You're able to dye synthetic satin?
No, we didn't dye it.
Okay.
It came in that color, which was one reason why we were limited, because what was going to be silvery and shiny that we could get in massive yardage in Australia? Just not much.
Yeah. This is another common thing I hear a lot. Like, were you coming out of the pandemic as this was happening? Because I was hearing a lot of shortages of fabrics in the last few years. Was this part of the challenge you were experiencing?
A little bit, but it's
Yeah.
also being on an island like Australia.
Oh, yeah.
Like there's no overnight Amazon. Like
Yes.
there's no such thing as overnight Amazon. We actually had an office in the US because getting something in the US and shipping it FedEx to Australia was quicker than having anyone else send it to us.
So you didn't pack a shipping container full of stuff and then put it on a ship and send it over?
We didn't.
I've heard of people doing that. That's why I'm asking.
Yeah, well, we would have needed much more heads up. Like
Sure.
somehow it was like everything we needed was like
Mhm.
last minute. You know, we did. I mean, we did have, and we did a bunch of prep in the US. So initially we did have shipping containers go over. But then at some point, it's like everything happens so fast. You need to be able to get something in 2 or 3 days.
Yeah, that's crazy. So,
Yeah.
do you know how many yards of lame you ended up using in the
Oh
end?
my God, I don't. This is like my ACD is in Japan. Otherwise, I
Yeah.
would have like said, can she
That's just a
be on this too?
curious question I had. So, aside from the fabrics, what do you think was the biggest challenge of
So,
doing so many
right, costumes.
for
Well,
everybody?
I think it's a workload for one, and it's project management, right? Like making sure you're getting it out in time, but also not freaking out and being like, oh my God, we need 67 million multiples on day one, because you actually don't. So it's coordination so that you're not overworking your workroom, so that you're properly spending your budget and not going to production and making a stupid case for why you need more labor when production can just be like, but like not all of these established right away, which is true. So one thing is being wildly organized, right? It's having an amazing made to order book. It's making sure everything is mega labeled, like all of your fabrics. It's developing charts to be like, here's how much of this we need. Here's when we need to deliver it. Here's when we need the stunt person to be able to fit. The other thing I would say is David Leitch was also a stuntman, like for a very long time. Like he came up in the business from nothing, from like handing out his headshot to random people on set. And so when you have a David Leitch as well, it's really helpful, and a Chris O'Hara too. But like, it's really helpful because they're very, very clear on what you need and what you don't need, what you're going to see, what you're not going to see, how many molts you need, how many molts you don't need. Or if you're like, I cannot get these, you guys just changed the calendar, we can't get these molts done in time. If you let them know, they will figure out a way to make it work. So that's also a really important, that was a really important part of us making this work on Fall Guy. The fact that we could have that kind of communication and they understand, like David understands, okay, let's say we had a stunt that was riding a motorcycle. He can't wear the gold lame pants and the exact boots. He has to wear leather pants, and he has to wear boots that we're going to paint the same color. David totally gets that. Whereas some other people are like, no, but wait, it won't match, and it's kind of like, but if it's a person riding a motorcycle, there's suspension of disbelief anyways. Like, we're going to make it look the same. We've done it before. So some of it's that. Also, it's having a great supervisor. Ellie Kamal, my supervisor, has worked on a ton of action movies. And also, I feel like Australian set teams are amazing at action. And a lot of times also it's your set team that's helping you with multiples. They're telling you, like, we don't need as many of these. We need more of these. They're falling apart. So
yes.
Sometimes on David projects, it's the ultimate for stunts because he gets it. His stunt coordinator gets it. There's an amazing communication. Like, the producer generally gets it. And the producer on this was amazing. You're going to hire an action supervisor. They get it. It can be harder when you're doing a stunt project with people who aren't used to doing so many big stunts, because then you're more having to like explain it, and they don't trust you that the boots are going to look the same, or you're not going to see it. So there's just like more effort and money spent there.
Mm-hmm. How long was the shooting? How many weeks did you go? Like, so you were saying for day one, you needed some stuff, but
a good question.
Where you were?
It was over the holidays too. I feel like we were shooting for 5 months. I can't remember. I never really exactly keep track of that.
But also, you would have been, what time of the year were you shooting?
We were shooting, when was I there? Like, I was there, I feel like we were shooting, oh my God, wait. We started shooting in the fall and kind of like went to the spring.
Yeah, so at least you weren't shooting during the hot months.
Yes,
that would have been unbearable
during the super hot months at all, but there was like a ton of rain, which was sort of unusual.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, because they get forest fires, I guess, in the summer, and then they get the rain.
Yeah.
And
In the winter.
um,
Yeah.
so listen, I have this question from one of my patrons. I
Okay.
hope you don't mind me asking. His name
No,
is
please
Tommy
do.
Essen. He's
Okay.
awesome. So
Love
shout out to
it.
Tommy for this. He said, this
Okay.
is a great question he asked. He says, when working on a stunt heavy film, especially one with such creative stunts and former stuntmen as the director, so he's very informed,
Yeah.
how much interaction do you have with the stunt coordinators early in the design process? Well, that's part of his question. Should I
Yeah.
just ask it all? Are
Yeah.
you able to get a sense in advance of where harnesses, rigging, wires, padding, and other elements will be needed to be situated, as well as the range of movement required? Or is it more about adapting the hero costume after it's already been designed? Sorry, it's a very long
It's
question.
okay. I think I get
It
it.
sounds like you've already sort of been talking about some of this with, coordinating with the
Yeah.
stunt coordinator. So,
Yeah. Yeah.
sorry, Sarah.
It, no, it's good. It's good. I think I can answer it. And then if we feel like I've missed some, we can go back.
Sure.
It depends on your project, of course. Like I was saying, David Leitch project is like such an ideal project because I am talking to David. I'm talking to Chris early on. David and Chris came up together. Like David and Chris know similar things. And like I said, like I told Chris, like David went for the gold lame early on, and Chris is really, really, really collaborative. So you make it work. And I've worked with Chris before too. So if you're lucky, you're able to talk to people ahead of time. But you can't always. So a lot of costume design is sort of to being like, here I am in this situation. What do I do? When I get to talk to Chris, then we really can, when he's involved early and I'm involved early, then we really can strategize like, okay, here's what we're going to do for the motorcycle rider. Here's what we're going to do for the guy flying through the air. Here's what we're going to do for the guy catching on fire. And again, it's not just me. Like this is your ACD, this is your key, this is your supervisor. It's really a lot of work coordinating. Stunts is a whole thing on their own. It's your set customers taking care of stunts. Like I cannot emphasize enough how much of like a team effort this is. And this is like the whole department working on this. But let's say you weren't able early on to talk to the stunt guy. You're going to make your hero costume and then you're going to talk to him and first of all, you're going to figure out what kind of stunt coordinator is he. Some stunt coordinators want to be talking about how to like pre-rig the harness, or they want to be telling you where they think the pick points are. And some stunt coordinators are more just like, okay, we're going to work it out on the day, or we'll figure it out on the day. Just make sure you have X amount of multiples so that if something has a pick point, like you have a clean one too, right? Like you have one without a hole.
Yeah, so like you would have to cut holes into the jacket, for instance, for the harness, I guess. I
Yes,
don't know anything about it. That's
like
why.
the harness goes out. So there are different kind of harnesses, but like, so you figure out what kind of harness the person is wearing and you put it under their costume, and then you put the costume over, and on your stunt guys, you've probably fit them with a harness, or like you've left enough room for a harness. Then the pick points are on the harness. There are kind of like all sorts of these different rings. Like it's kind of like sometimes tactical vests look like they're not actual rings. They're like webbing rings kind of.
Yes, I know what you mean.
Areas that you can like attach a metal hook, but like it's a professional hook with like whatever the metal string that's going to pull them, right? So it's like at that moment when they know where they're being pulled, they're like, okay, we need to attach it here and here. And then you make a hole in the clothing and then they put it through and they attach it.
Okay, gotcha.
And now that's how they're pulling it.
Okay, so you sometimes do that the day of, like the day that you're shooting.
Like I feel like a lot of times lately I've done it the day of.
But during a fitting, you would have them wearing their rig underneath just to make sure you have enough ease and everything in there.
Exactly.
Okay. Oh, that's so fascinating. Wow, I'm learning so much today.
Yeah.
Hopefully everyone in the audience is.
Also, sometimes this isn't totally true with harnesses, but with other stuff, sometimes you'll be like, oh, that person is doing major fighting. They need a lot of movement. So you'll put like a gusset in the crotch and a gusset in the armpit. Or I've had a situation where a woman was wearing a pencil skirt, but then she needed to fight in a pencil skirt. So we made her multiple out of spandex. You know, like
Yes.
there are besides the pick points, there are other things you're thinking about when it comes to their action.
Hmm.
Those things you have to do before the day, but pick points you can do on the day.
Yeah, it's
As
kind of
long
like
as you
in
have
dan in
enough
dance, I know they do a lot of
multiple.
those techniques, right? They'll put
Yeah,
spandex, in the
yeah,
seams and make it give more ease.
yeah.
By the way, I was gonna just ask you a quick question as well. So the person who's on set, or do they specialize in working with stunts? Because that sounds like your wardrobe key would be have a specialization. I can't imagine just pulling any key off the street and saying,
Yeah.
"Here, do this role, please."
Yes, they usually they'll have a
Yeah.
specialization in stunts, especially when you get into the big stunt movies. Like, yes, you've got a guy who gets it, or not a guy, you've got a person
Mhm.
who gets it, has done it a lot. Yeah,
Yeah, because and I'm assuming I shouldn't assume anything, but these people must have worked up their way up just so that they've been in different roles, and through the time they've moved up to these key roles.
yeah,
But and you have worked with this director twice before. So were the other two movies also stunt heavy,
yeah. With
Sarah?
him, I did Hobbs and Shaw,
Oh, okay,
and
yes.
so that was hugely stunt heavy. And I did Bullet Train, which
Oh,
is also
yes.
hugely stunt heavy. That's where we made
Amazing.
spandex.
I love that movie. It was funny because I was calling Aaron Taylor Joy and Johnson
Johnson.
Aaron Taylor Joy because someone was like Anya Taylor Joy. I know it kind of confused me.
Totally, totally. I can see that. Yeah.
Um, anyway, so great question from Tommy. I don't know if we answered everything. He was saying, yeah, no, I think you captured everything, it looks
Yeah,
like.
I think
So,
so.
all right, we haven't talked about Ryan Reynolds
Okay.
here at all. So we should probably
Ryan
talk about
Gosling.
Ryan
Ryan
Gosling. Oh my
Gosling.
God,
Yeah,
sorry, they're both Canadian.
they are, and
Um,
David's worked with both of
Yes,
them.
and actually, I met Ryan Gosling many years ago at a party, and he
Awesome.
was lovely. He was a
Yeah,
total sweetheart.
really lovely.
Um, so anyway, yeah, Ryan Gosling. So he plays Colt Seavers, who's the
Mhm.
main character, which is also the name of the main character, I believe, in the original Fall Guy.
Yes.
Is that correct?
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's right.
So he has lots of non-stunt looks, and it's funny because I was just thinking because I've got the Fall Guy little bug at the top there in that neon kind of yellow. One of his most iconic outfits is that yellow outfit he wears, right?
Yeah. Yeah, 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 yeah.
So,
Yeah.
do you want to tell me a little bit about some of his looks?
Yes, definitely. Working with Ryan was great. Ryan also has his Ryan's costumer and his stylist is Mark Avery. So also like working with Ryan is working with Mark, and they are really like filmmakers. Like it's amazing working with them because they bring a lot of collaboration and a lot of great ideas to the table, and they really, really, really push for the best, which is always amazing. Like it's really hard when you have an actor that like doesn't want to do a fitting, doesn't really care because, well, first of all, a lot of the magic happens in the fittings and it's really difficult. Like you're really depending on luck if you're not getting a ton of fittings. So working with Ryan was honestly fantastic. Like it's one of those situations where I feel like I learned so much from Ryan, just in terms of like film references and just ways of thinking about design and stuff. Actually, he wore the neon. Well, actually, there were two yellows that he wore.
It's not,
But
well,
he
I don't
wore
even know if
Are
it's
you talking
neon. It
about
was just a very bright yellow. He had the little hat on and everything. And he
Yes,
was,
yes. Okay,
yes.
technically, yes,
Yeah.
it was very bright green.
Okay.
Technically, it was actually kind of neon. But so we've been thinking about this Dogs in Space costume for a long time. Like, we actually had to devise it before Aaron Taylor Johnson was even cast. So we like didn't even really know because he goes into that guy's closet and he goes into the movie star's closet that he's looking for and he takes his stuff. But we were like, what would be in his closet? Who even knows? We went through a ton of incarnations of things. I think in part because we were like, we don't even know what it would be. We're not even sure what Dogs in Space, the club, is. And we landed on the bright yellow trench coat and hat. And actually, that really informed the club itself. Like when Ryan got very neon, the club got very neon. And that was like super cool too.
It reminded me of a Wham video. I think it's "Wake Me Up" or something. Before you
Oh,
go,
yeah.
it's everything.
Yes. Yeah, totally. Yeah, the club was fun. That was like a fun
That's
night.
awesome. But
Yeah.
what about his other, like, just his, I think his
Yeah.
other,
His
he had
regular
some
look.
very cool looks.
Yes. So we had our first fitting and we tried lots and lots of stuff on. And I sort of pitched this idea. I feel like you're Southern California. I feel like you grew up maybe like riding dirt bikes or surfing, just like one of those kids that was like super active, like not a ton of money. And maybe like you came up, then you started like fixing your own motorbikes and fixing your own surfboards. And it was that situation where like you were in Manhattan Beach and someone was like, have you ever thought of being a stuntman? So you kind of come to it from that like Southern California kind of like surfer biker vibe. And he definitely got on board with that. So that was like a really exciting
I
coup.
love that.
And
You
we
gave him his subtext.
I did. I mean, I hope so. I think I did. And of course,
I love
like,
it.
he had stuff he added to it too. Actually, speaking of the Miami Vice jacket, because we had to figure out what his jacket was going to be, and which was made doubly hard by the fact that he's had so many iconic jackets in movies already. So then you get like, oh my God, that's too much like Drive. That's too much like this. That's too much like that. But his two main jackets, the Miami Vice jacket and then the red jacket, the Miami Vice jacket actually early on came from Ryan and Mark. Like they had found that jacket on eBay. And of course, it's a moment where you see that jacket and you're like, shit, I didn't get to that yet. Why didn't I find that? I would have found that.
Yeah.
That's
You
so
would have
cool.
eventually
I should
found
have
it.
found that. You
Yeah.
kind of just have to be like, set your ego aside and be like, I'm so glad someone found that, because it belongs in the movie. And it was super cool because there wasn't even the Miami Vice part of the script yet. Like that jacket informed that part of the script in that entire stunt where he ends up like jumping the boat.
Yeah.
So that was the Miami Vice jacket. And then the other jacket, we shopped a bunch of jackets and I just like on a whim also made a couple that I couldn't find. Like I was just like, I think this could be super cool. And I think this could be super cool. And the red jacket ended up being one of the ones I'd made.
Oh, amazing.
So that was rad.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So
and it's good that you were, and the fact that you made it too, because then you were able to do duplicates.
Multiply it.
Yeah.
100%. Well, actually, technically the Miami Vice jacket needed duplicates too. So we did have to remake that jacket. And the original jacket was, I can't remember. The original jacket had a different color right here than our hero jacket ended up with. But we did have to remake that one too, which is also I feel like a massive specialty of my ACD's Annie Loper. It's like remaking a vintage item because somehow
because then you have to deconstruct it. It's sort of a different brain. Like it must use a different part of your brain, maybe the back of your brain.
Yeah, and you also have to figure out how to age it down to make it look vintage, because even though when vintage things were new, they didn't look aged, to us now, they look aged.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean?
Absolutely,
like,
yes.
People like the patina. Like the patina on the Miami Vice stunt team jacket was the patina from like the 80s. And so we had to kind of like recreate that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I actually remember sort of like, I think flight jackets were really big in the 80s. And then, they would always have like some type of distressing, I guess. Like the 80s was big about distressing, right? Like sandblasting and things like that.
Yeah.
Now, what about Emily Blunt? I was reading something about her hat that Ryan Gosling was making some comment about her hat. But do you want to tell us about Jodie's wardrobe a bit?
Yes.
On the show?
Emily Blunt was also like such a treasure to work with, an amazing collaborator. Actually, Jodie's, so we kind of started with these like a Greta Gerwig and these female director types. But I think really what sort of ended up happening is obviously Emily and I have seen a ton of outfits on set that we've really been into. Like there is a thing to dressing on set and it's really rad. So yes, like kind of like spirit animal-y wise, we were looking at Greta Gerwig and she does there are pictures of her wearing jumpsuits. And so like the jumpsuit idea came from that. But when we were in the fitting, we were kind of like, oh my God, I once saw this outfit where this girl was wearing this and this with a Hawaiian shirt and big boots. Like, that's how a lot of it happened with Emily. Um, and that was really fun. And also, like, the gardener hat is a big on set thing. And we had a gardener hat for her, but we didn't plan for her to wear, or actually, like, I feel like it's more of like, it's a surfer gardener hat. We didn't plan for her to wear the hat with that outfit, but she had rehearsal and she went out with the hat. She's like, can I have a hat? The like sun is super bright. And she went out with the hat. And I feel like they were joking about it in rehearsal, and it's like made its way into the film.
Yes, that often happens, right? Something's in rehearsal that ends up in the show.
Yep,
Well,
for
and
sure.
it makes sense, right? It does really make sense because it's supposed to be like a very hot desert sort of
Yes,
location. So it makes
yes,
sense that she would have a big wide brim hat and
for
then with
sure.
the drawstring just so because of the wind, right?
Yes,
It's
because
actually
you're
perfectly makes sense.
literally wearing the drawstring on that hat. Like, that is
Yeah,
part of the appeal of that hat. You can keep
for
it on your
sure.
head.
And then the coveralls, kind of again makes
Yeah.
sense. It's very functional. It's got lots of pockets. She can put all her gadgets and everything. So I'm sure she appreciated. By the way, I'm always reading about actresses loving pockets
Yeah. Yeah,
in
yeah,
their
yeah, yeah, yeah.
costumes.
Yeah. Another thing we did on that costume was, like, she would have, well, this isn't, like, actually always true with directors, but it is true with, like, camera people and ADs and everyone else. You always need a belt to, like, put your walkie on and put your stuff in. And so we kind of felt like she would have had a belt to, like, make it utilitarian. And my leather worker, Meg Ashford, had a belt like that. And she wore it. And I loved how she wore it. Like, she'd wear it big and looped around. And so Meg, like, made that belt for Emily. I mean, I basically
Oh,
was like, Meg, can you please remake your belt? Like, Emily needs to be wearing this.
that's amazing. She
Yeah.
must have been just tickled that you were
Yeah.
like inspired by her as well,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Yeah.
and that
Yeah.
and what was Emily's response to that belt?
Loved.
Yeah, so
Loved.
great.
Mhm.
Um Now I'm just maybe going to ask you one more question because I don't want to keep you
Yeah.
too long.
All good.
But of course, one of my favorite characters was Tom Ryder, Aaron
Yeah.
Taylor Johnson.
Yeah.
We were speaking of that one outfit in his closet, but in terms of his other looks, I mean, he's got so many great looks.
Oh my God.
he's
That was
he's
so
kind of
fun.
bonkers. Like
He's totally
someone did a
bonkers.
video, I think, just about all the post-it notes he has up, all his
Yeah.
self affirmations that he
Yeah.
has on
Yeah.
his wall.
Yeah.
He's so bonkers, that guy.
He was, I mean, like, it's my second time working with Aaron Taylor Johnson, who I love. I really, really love working with him. He's, like, super fun to collaborate with. He's super fun to dress. And he was cast late. So it was like he was coming late for a fitting, which is always hard, because you want to get your fittings in there to, like, make the magic happen. But we had talked, and I feel like we just started with Tom Ryder being super random, and the Nirvana glasses from like those white glasses and the hat that Kurt Cobain wears in that one picture. That was, like, kind of our jumping off point. The thing is that was super fun is Aaron looks amazing in all clothing. So you can put the most ridiculous thing on him and it is epic. And I feel that that was kind of like the inspiration. Like, what is just an insane combination of clothing that is kind of going to look strangely amazing.
Yeah, like that one confrontation scene, he's wearing like a bathrobe or something.
Oh my God.
But he looks so great in it. How
I know.
often do you have that
And banana
experience?
yellow
Yeah.
leather pants.
Yeah. How often do you work with someone who is like that, where you're able to just put anything on them and like you could put a burlap sack on them and they would look amazing? How
I
often does that
mean,
happen?
it's not that often. Who can, like, being able to pull it off, like, both body and spirit. I
Mhm.
feel like that's one of the reasons that, like, Aaron is just, like, one of my favorites of all time, because he'll go there. He'll
I
really
didn't
go.
even know, by the way, when I saw Bullet Train, I didn't even know that was him.
Yes.
I had no idea. He was so like kind of
Yeah.
into his character. I didn't even get it until someone mentioned it later on. I'm like, oh my God, that was him.
Yeah.
Because of course I loved, what was that superhero movie he did when he was a teenager? I love that movie.
Wait, what superhero movie did he do when he was a teenager?
He was badass or super bad
Oh,
or
yes, yes,
was
yes,
it
yes.
not
I
super
think you're
bad?
right. Was it
Yeah,
Superbad?
he's really young in it. And then
Yeah.
I think Nick Cage is in it as well.
Yeah.
It's an amazing. We watched it recently with my kids.
Yeah. Awesome.
So yeah, no, I didn't even know it was him, but absolutely loved him in this. And so before I let you go, I just want to ask one
Yeah.
more thing because there was a
Great.
cameo. I
Yeah.
didn't even know. I knew it was Lee Majors, but I didn't know it was Heather Thomas. So she was in the original,
Yeah.
The Fall Guy, the
Yeah.
TV series from back in the 80s. So you had a cameo with that. What was that like working with those two?
I mean, it was amazing. Like Lee is such an old timer. He was just like, we were in and out with the fitting. He was like, I'll be wearing this.
Yeah.
But it was epic. And I was like super Star Trek. He's so like iconic,
Absolutely. He's married to
and
Farrah Fawcett. A lot of
yes,
people, yeah.
she was amazing. I mean, Heather
Yeah.
was amazing, like really fun, really
Yeah,
awesome.
she's still gorgeous. Like she's absolutely gorgeous still.
Yeah.
And so that just thought that was really a little fun little thing at the end. Hopefully everyone caught that. But anyway, Sarah, I want to thank you so much. But before I let you go, is there anything you're working on? Do you want to tell me about anything that you have coming up?
Well, I just something coming out is like the show Paradise on Hulu that I didn't just finish, but it's about to come out end of January with Sterling K. Brown and created by Dan Fogelman. So I'm really excited about that and really excited for it to come out. I feel like they haven't really released the marketing on it yet. And then right now I'm doing a project in New York that I can't quite talk about yet, but happy to be working in New York. It's always fun to learn a new place.
Oh, amazing. So haven't started it yet?
I have.
You have?
I have started. I'm just home for the holidays.
Oh, okay. Oh, so you have to go back to the cold of New York. I'm in Toronto, so their weather is very close to what we have. So,
right.
although, yeah, it's been actually a fairly mild winter. So I wish that you have a nice mild winter. But also, so Paradise is coming out. Is it January?
I think it's January 28th on Hulu.
Okay. Well, maybe I'll have you back and maybe you'll come back and talk to me about it.
I'd love that. Thank you so
What's
much.
the genre? Is it supernatural or
a little sci-fi?
Sci-fi. Oh, I'm all over that. I like sci-fi.
Yeah.
Well, anyway, I want to thank you so much because I know we're just at the end of the winter holidays, the Christmas holidays, and I want to thank you so much for spending time with me. Both Sarah and I were saying this was sort of the first thing we both have done.
Yeah.
So it's just spending time with family. Hopefully, you got to spend some time with family and loved ones.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much again for taking the time. So again, Sarah Evelyn, she's the costume designer for the Fall Guy. And and one more thing. When are the awards for the Costume Designer Guild?
I think they're February 6th.
Okay, so February 6th, we'll keep an eye out to see how things go. So it's just in the judging process at the moment, I think, right?
Yes, exactly.
All right. Well, thanks everyone. And thanks everyone for joining us. And also Tommy for your great question. Have a great day, everyone. Bye now.